What's going on, fam? Getting over had a little cold for a while, but I seem to be making progress. So, we are conversating about the pagan world before Christianity. This is Great Courses audiobook, and you can find this on Amazon or wherever you get your audiobooks from. This is presented by Professor Hans Friedrich Muller. At least I think I'm saying that right. So, with that being said, let's get into it.
This, in brief, encapsulates crucial elements of a sacrifice. A sacrifice entails a shared meal between human beings and gods and among human beings. Sacrifice is communal and brings human beings together with the gods at the same table to share a meal, to break bread, as it were, if the gods were vegetarian, or to slit throats, as is the case here, to feed on flesh. Many of us, too, I would wager, also eat meat, and so those of us who do are as complicit in the slaughter of animals as anyone who practiced animal sacrifice. It is also worth noting that the animal's permission was required. Homer omitted some details. Let us review the procedure a bit more formally. What can one sacrifice? A sacrifice must be something that at some point was alive, either vegetable or animal, because a sacrifice must be something that is potentially capable of bringing gods and human beings together for a meal. The meaning of sacrifice is intimately tied up in the concept of communion, a coming together of divine and human realms. We may classify sacrifices according to their function. Honorific sacrifices, performed to please and honor the gods, these are the most common type. They bring gods and humans together for communion and a meal. Sacrifices that do not involve shared meals, the god gets everything, are piacular and are performed to expiate sins or crimes. Human sacrifices, in the Greco-Roman context, usually fall under this category. Animals certainly could be, and were, regularly enough, burnt in their entirety as well. Sacramental sacrifices are the most rare, but involve, in addition to a meal and communion, a mystical union with the god. The god is conceived of as being present in, rather than at, the meal. Those present, thus, eat the god. Worship of Dionysus or Bacchus may serve as an example. When Maenads tore apart and ate wild animals, they conceived of themselves as eating Bacchus himself in order to become one with him and in him. The lines between all these types of sacrifices are naturally blurred. The important thing to keep in mind is that a sacrifice involves offering a meal to the gods. This key concept is underscored by 5th century BCE Athenian vase paintings that depict gods hovering over.
So he was talking about burning of offerings and how in a lot of ancient religions, when they ate the body, when they ate the meat of the animal, it was they were communing with the gods. They were becoming one with the gods. And I couldn't help but remember when I used to go to church, how they would talk about communion. And from what I understand, they still do it today. In the Christian churches, especially some of the Catholic churches, most of them anyway, they do a ceremony where you eat a wafer of bread and a small juice, like a grape juice or grape wine. And the juice or the wine represents the blood of Christ, and the wafer the bread represents the body of Christ. So instead of offering up harvests, you would, or offering up your children, because a lot of religions, they offered children to the gods. They killed the kids. Well, according to Christianity, God stopped all that. He felt it wasn't right, so he decided from now on you're going to just sacrifice the animals. And when they ate the animals, because at first they didn't eat the animals, they would just slaughter the beast and leave it there, I guess. I don't know. But eventually they end up switching up and they slaughtered the beast and they ate the animal. So that was interesting that he would say that reminded me of Christianity. And a lot of the pagan beliefs back then were rolled over infused into Christianity.
Present. A sacrifice, moreover, meant a great feast. Meat eating was not as common in antiquity as it is today. Even more rarely were animals killed and given over entirely to the gods. Most of the time, human beings ate most of the sacrifice, and the gods contented themselves with the smell of burning guts that no human being really wanted to eat. We thus discover that sacrifice, far from being the unnecessary killing of animals, provided a rather regulated system whereby human beings were granted access to meat, but in a context that acknowledged the sacred status of animals who belonged to the gods and whom one was not to kill lightly, as opposed to simply grinding them up en masse and putting their flesh in shrink-wrapped plastic. Another important element of sacrifice was the opportunity for conversation with the gods. Gods communicated not through human speech, but through signs. The process of reading communiques from the gods during sacrifice is called divination. Gods could express themselves through the sacrificial victim. Hence, when the animal was sliced open, special priests would examine the entrails, especially the liver, and determine what the gods were thinking. An intestinal version of astrology, as it were, and a very complex ancient science indeed. In addition to these interior signs,
I'm not understanding that. It reminds me of those old movies you see where the person has a little tea leaves or the bones in a jar. They shake it up and they toss them on the table. How are you going to cut up an animal and examine their liver and entrails to know what the gods were thinking? That sounds weird. Very freaking weird. But let's continue.
As it were, and a very complex ancient science indeed. In addition to these interior signs, legible only to expert priests, exterior signs, visible to all, could occur too. The animals were expected to approach the altar willingly. And why would they not? How can one expect an animal to know that altars are for sacrifice rather than providing treats? An unwilling animal meant that the god was not happy. The appearance of anything odd during the ritual was ominous as well. If a snake were, for example, to appear during the sacrifice. One could not simply sacrifice any animal to any god. Male gods received male animals, female gods female animals. Sky gods received light-colored animals. Gods of the earth and underworld received dark ones. The basic principle was like for like. The gods, who are perfect and immortal, thus accepted only healthy animals. In our Greek example, we concentrate on action, the sacrifice of animals at an altar in order to please, honor, thank, beg favor from, and enter into communication with the gods. The business was practical and the transaction straightforward. People came together, killed a victim, let the gods savor the smoke, ate the rest, sang songs, and told stories. Ancient Indian sacrifice in the Rig Veda shows interesting parallels,
Sounds like a barbecue.
but also offers some reflective divergence that may shed light on what sacrifice meant in the Indo-European context. Aside from the role of the priest in speaking sacred words, the Rig Veda does not speak vigorously about the spectacular moment of the sacrifice. Let us thus begin with what the Rig Veda does tell us. Like Greco-Roman sacrifice, great emphasis was placed on the correct performance of ritual. The ritual had to be correct, or the whole ceremony had to be repeated. To assure accuracy, 4 priests shared duties. The hotar, or sacrificer, invoked the gods in prayer or hymn. The udgatar, or chorister, provided chants in conjunction with the hotar. The advaryu served as officiating priest. He performed ritual duties that involved material, for example, kindling fire. He did not, however, slaughter animals. A special samitar performed this task. A small animal was strangled. This was a potentially dangerous duty. The victim had to be appeased too, and as among the Greeks, the animal was supposed to consent, or at least not moan. The Brahmin served as superintending priest and checked for mistakes. This brief overview suffices to show that sacrifice was very much rooted in practice as well as theory. Let us turn to actual texts. A hymn entitled "The Origins of Sacred Speech" outlines the importance of speech to ritual performance. Speech, who is personified, is central. Where does one find sacred speech? In the sages, that is, in the priests. Knowledge of how to perform sacrifice properly will manifest itself as an exclusively priestly monopoly. Through the sacrifice, they traced the path of speech and found it in the sages. This hymn indicates the importance of speech by comparing its, or her, personified and seductive power to a wife who reveals her body to her husband. Patriarchy, we note, was not exclusive to the Mediterranean. On the other hand, although priests have a monopoly on this power, not all priests are equal. Some have more knowledge than others. According to verse 8, when the intuitions of the mind are shaped in the heart, when Brahmins perform sacrifices together as friends, some are left behind for lack of knowledge, while others surpass them with the power to praise. Another hymn allows speech to speak in her own voice. Is this merely literary personification, or is speech conceived of as a divine force in her own right? Speech tells us that she is the most powerful force in the universe. She organizes the gods. Quote, I move with the Rudras, with the Vasus, with the Adityas, and all the gods. I carry both Mitra and Varuna, both Indra and Agni, and both of the Asvins. In fact, by the end of the hymn, speech claims to be coextensive with the entire universe. I gave birth to the Father on the head of this world. My womb is in the waters within the ocean. From there I spread out over all creatures and touched the very sky with the crown of my head.
So I'm thinking, he's referring to, according to the text, it sounds like the universe is female. Now, I'm trying to tie this in. Oh, excuse me. I'm trying to tie this in. But what if ceremonially, well, not ceremonially, but metaphorically speaking, a woman's water breaks and then a child is born shortly after. So what if, not that I believe this, but some people are trying to actually find out who came before God. God is both male and female. God is the energy source of all creation. So what if he gave birth to himself? The small nucleus, or whatever you want to call it, in the universe, and one day the water breaks, metaphorically speaking, and it just releases all types of energy into the known universe. I really don't want to get into that aspect of it, but I'm just saying, it's a thought. Well, that's all for now. I don't feel like any long drawn out videos like I usually do, so this one's going to be short. But comment below what your thoughts are so far. Sacrifices and gods. And we'll talk later.